What up, ninjas? The measurement of progress. That's a tricky one in jiu-jitsu. How do I know if I'm getting good, or do I just suck at jiu-jitsu and there's no hope for me, right? We've all had that feeling. Everybody goes through the phase of not being good at it, right? Like nobody starts jiu-jitsu and is like born with like super skills, right? Like that's not a thing. There's no natural born talent in jiu-jitsu, right? Like we're all gonna have certain attributes, physicalities with our body that are gonna be our strengths for us. For me, it's that I'm tall and lanky and I'm fairly flexible. You know, the flexibility is something that I've developed over time, but my body style was just how I was born. So there's gonna be certain techniques and certain movements that are gonna work really well and efficiently for my body makeup. And the same for you too, whether you have long arms or short arms, it all works out. Like short arms are great. Like it's hard for me to armbar people with short arms. It's hard for me to finish triangles on people with short arms. So whether you're long or short or tall or somewhere in the middle, the cool thing is that jiu-jitsu will take you as you are. So the first step is like understanding like what is your physical attribute, okay? And some of that's going to come down to like, yeah, physical things about you, how you're built, but other things are going to be sort of personality driven too. Like I'm a high energy person. So like when I roll, I like to move a lot. I like to be fast. I like to be a little bit more athletic because I love the athleticism, and that's something that I'm good at. But there are times too when like maybe I'm not good at that. Maybe I'm tired, or, you know, that's not how I'm feeling that day. So I have to make adjustments in the moment based on how I'm feeling that day, even though those may be my strengths. But it can't come to just rely on those two. But you have to identify what your strengths are. Maybe you're a bigger guy or a bigger gal, so maybe you like a little bit slower game and a little bit more pressure passing and maybe holding people down or whatever, right? So you start to understand kind of like what maybe you're going to be good at. And maybe you're not good at that yet, and that's okay. That's okay. So if you're a tall, lanky person, you're probably going to be good at triangles. You're going to be good at a lot of leg stuff and sweeps and guard game. So you start to identify what you're going to be good at, but it's also going to take time. That's not going to be something that's going to happen like immediately. Once you identify that, you start building your game around that, but it can't just be that. Like if you're a big, strong person, it can't be that you're using just strength. If you're a flexible person or a fast person, I can't be just using that. I also need to have really good technique. What's technique? Well, technique is made up of leverage and timing. Okay, so you have technique on one end, and then you have your physicalities on the other end, the things that you're good at, and you bring those two worlds together, and that starts to create the student that you're going to become. But when you begin this, you're not going to be good right away. Like no one's good at this right away. It takes time, it takes sacrifice, it takes work, but it also takes creating the right conditions too, right? Like if you're going to plant a flower or a seed in the ground, right? A vegetable or something, right? Like you would put it in the ground, but you wouldn't just like kick some dirt over it and walk away. Like you'd have to give it all the right conditions for it to be successful. And part of the conditions is that you'd have to be really patient. You can't go back and like dig up the hole a couple days later and see what that seed's doing down there. You can't, you know, a little sprout starts coming through and there it is, some hope. You can't make hope happen faster by tugging at it or pulling at it or yanking at it, right? So think about your jiu-jitsu training. What that can be metaphorically could be that like you're pushing yourself so hard, so crazy hard that you're actually hurting yourself too. You don't give up your life for jiu-jitsu, you give jiu-jitsu to your life. Let me say that again. You don't give up your life for jiu-jitsu, you give jiu-jitsu to your life. You didn't start this to like stop doing everything else in your life. You started this to enhance your life maybe, or you know, something, a new hobby or something that really interests you. But you don't give up your life for it, right? Like you can't do this 7 days a week. You got to find this nice balance, right? So you create the right conditions for that seedling to grow. It gets sunlight, it gets water, it gets love, it gets care, it gets a little bit of patience, it gives a little bit of time, and then something starts to happen. But it's hard for you from your perspective to see that happening. It's like trying to watch yourself grow when you're a kid. You don't really see yourself grow. Like all of a sudden one day someone sees you again and they're like, wow, I haven't seen you in a while. You look different, or you look taller, or you see yourself in a picture and you're like, wow, I look different now. When I look at pictures of myself a couple years ago, I'm like, man, my beard's so dark. Why is it so dark? And now it's like so white and gray. And I gotten older, but I don't see that happening maybe on a day-to-day basis. All of a sudden you see an old picture, you're like, man, my beard was dark back then, but you don't really see the change happening. But here's the thing. Your instructor sees it, your professor sees it, the people around you see it. And that's where you have to trust in the process, even though you can't see it yourself, right? Like, it's kind of like, over the years I've seen students, I haven't really had this experience a whole lot, but I've seen it in other schools where like, somebody gets a stripe or a belt or whatever, and they're like, oh, I don't deserve it. Or maybe they want to take the stripe off their belt. Oh, I don't want it. I'm not good enough, right? A little bit of that imposter syndrome. Like you feel like you're not deserving of it. It's not like you get something and then you're that, right? You're growing into it. Like you don't get your blue belt and you've mastered blue belt. Like you're at the beginning stages of blue belt. You're at the beginning stages of purple belt. So you don't wake up there and you're like, boom, I'm it, right? But you have to have trust in your professor that they're going to see that. But you got to give them something to work from, right? Like you got to come to class, you got to try hard, you got to work your butt off, you got to make a commitment to it and some sacrifice without sacrificing your whole life. Again, it's that balance game. So how do you tell if you're getting better at jiu-jitsu? Well, some of it's going to be your belt rank, it's going to be stripes on your belt, but you can't just measure it by that. It can't also be that like, if I beat my instructor, then I'm going to be like, take their black belt, or that's going to get me to the next level. It's not about that. I always say I was never the benchmark for you. And I always say that I'm not trying to make my students better than me. Why am I part of that equation? I want you to be better than you. I want you to be the best version of yourself. I want you to be better than you've ever been before. And it doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm not the reflection in the mirror. You're the reflection in the mirror. That's who you're trying to become better than, right? A little bit better than you were last time. If you measure your success based on a win-loss paradigm, which can be both good and bad. If you're competing in tournaments, you kind of need to know like where you stand when you're grappling people. Like, am I getting tapped out by all the blue belts? Because if I am, and I'm a blue belt, and then I go to tournament, it's probably not going to go very well. So I have to look at how I'm doing on a day-to-day basis with my grappling, but I also can't measure it just from that perspective. Because you're going to have good days and bad days. Like you're going to have days where, and especially if you're training a lot, right? Like a tournament is a one-day event. You just got to show up and be on that day. But if you're measuring it on a day-to-day basis, you're going to make yourself a little crazy, because one day you're going to be like flying high. I'm doing this, man. I'm kicking ass. I'm an amazing blue belt. I'm an amazing purple belt, whatever. And then the next day you come in and it's not a good day. And you have those days where you feel like you couldn't even tap a white belt out. Does that mean you like suddenly suck at jiu-jitsu? Does that mean that everybody suddenly got better? Maybe they got better. Maybe that's why it's tougher today. Or maybe you're just having one of those days. Sometimes it comes down to the day of the week. Tuesday was better than Thursday. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes you're looking for a consistent vibe in your training, a nice flow. But remember, there's an ebb and a flow. There's an up and a down. There's a crest to that wave. It's still got to go back down again too. So it's never going to be this, still waters. It's going to be a little bit of this. And a little bit of that's actually okay, right? That's really being in the flow. There's going to be some like tough days and there's going to be great days. But really the true measurement is that you come in on the days where you don't feel like it. That's how you tell you're getting better. When that's not nearly as hard as it used to be. Like you're not dragging your bag behind you. You're just ready to get in there, even though maybe you're having a tough day. And you realize that when you have a tough day on the mats, it's not always a reflection of you, right? You're just going to have those days. So measure your success based on, am I better than I was 6 months ago? If I grappled myself 6 months ago, what would that look like? If I grappled myself a year ago, what would that look like? I think of myself as a black belt. I look back at when I was a beginning black belt, and I'm like, man, I'm such a different black belt than I was, 5 or 6 years ago. Like I feel totally different as a black belt. So I know that I'm growing and evolving as a black belt. If I was like, wow, I'm teaching the same stuff, doing the same thing I was 5 or 6 years ago, and grappling exactly the same, then there's really no evolution or revolution that's happening in my life. I'm just staying kind of stagnant. And that's a great measurement of success, and growth. So stay on the mats. If you haven't had a breakthrough yet, guess what? You're going to have one, but you got to stay on the mats. Consistency is always the key that unlocks everything. So stay on the mats, and I look forward to hearing about your breakthrough and all of your great successes in your jiu-jitsu career, in your jiu-jitsu training. Happy training.